September 27, 1986 was a date that would forever echo through the halls of music history, but not for the reasons anyone had anticipated. The heavy metal band Metallica had just dropped their game-changing album Master of Puppets 6 months prior, and their star was shining bright as they took center stage at the Solnahallen Arena in Stockholm, Sweden. With James Hetfield on vocals and rhythm guitar, Lars Ulrich on drums, Kirk Hammett on lead guitar, and Cliff Burton on bass guitar, Metallica electrified the audience with their iconic hits such as Master of Puppets and The Thing That Should Not Be. Having just completed an American tour with Ozzy Osbourne and now embarking on the European leg, the band was soaring to new heights of fame. But behind the scenes, a chilling fate was closing in. Little did they know that this would be the last time the band would perform with one of metal's greatest bass players, Cliff Burton. After Master of Puppets hit the shelves on March 3, 1986, Metallica started a big tour across the world, known as the Damage Inc. Tour. From March to August, the band hit the road, opening for Ozzy Osbourne across the United States and playing to large arena audiences for the very first time. And by the summer, Master of Puppets had sold more than 500,000 copies, giving the band their first gold record and taking them into the US Top 30. In September of that same year, the European leg of the tour kicked off and it seemed like nothing could stop them. At the third European show, which took place on September 27, 1986 at Solnahallen in Stockholm, the band outdid themselves once again, with bassist Cliff Burton surprising the audience with a unique version of the Star-Spangled Banner, in addition to his usual bass solo while headbanging around the stage and windmilling his right arm. Following this incredible performance, the band was filled with excitement as they climbed aboard the tour bus for the overnight drive to the next day's show in Copenhagen. The bus was quite cramped, so Kirk and Cliff decided to draw cards to determine who would get the more comfortable window side bunk. Cliff was the lucky one, and won when he picked the ace of spades. Cliff stayed up a bit longer that night, smoking some wacky tobacco, while James sipped on some vodka. Their beds were right next to each other at the back of the bus. As they both started to fall asleep, everything was calm and quiet, but unexpectedly, the bus went off the road. It was 6:15 a.m. and everyone on the bus was fast asleep. Suddenly, the bus started swaying violently from side to side like a roller coaster gone wild. This sudden and intense motion tossed the band members around inside, almost as if they were bouncing off the walls. Eventually, the bus flipped over and came to a stop on its side, amidst the noisy chaos of people crashing into broken glass and furniture. Amidst all the confusion and commotion, there were loud screams as the band members struggled to crawl out of the overturned bus in the early dark morning. They desperately called out each other's names, trying to make sure everyone was safe. Slowly, one by one, they managed to locate and confirm that everyone was okay. Everyone except for their bass player, Cliff Burton. "I heard everyone screaming except for Cliff, and I thought, oh my god, something's wrong," guitarist Kirk Hammett recalled. "When I got outside, I saw Cliff's legs sticking out from under the bus, and we completely lost our minds." With no safety restraints on the bunks, Cliff had been forcefully thrown through one of the windows of the bus, which then fell on top of him. As the band held on to hope for their friend's survival, they called for a crane to arrive and lift the bus to rescue him. However, in a heartbreaking twist of fate, just as they were about to free him, the chain slipped, leading to the bus crashing down on top of him once more. There are varying accounts from band members and witnesses about whether Cliff passed away upon the initial impact or when the bus fell down again. Nevertheless, the talented young musician tragically lost his life at the scene. Cliff died at the age of 24. The autopsy report would later reveal that Cliff's cause of death was attributed to chest compression with a pulmonary contusion. The immense weight of the bus, combined with the forceful impact when it fell on him, resulted in significant pressure on his chest. This not only caused excruciating pain, but also made it incredibly hard for him to breathe. The pressure on his chest led to the development of a pulmonary contusion, which refers to severe bruising and damage to the lung tissue due to this intense force. Ultimately, it was this chest injury that tragically led to his untimely passing. According to the bus driver, the tour bus had apparently skidded and flipped over due to black ice on the road, but none of the band members believed his explanation. Metallica's frontman James Hetfield even walked miles up and down the road in his socks and underwear, searching for black ice but found none. When he saw the bus driver covering Cliff with a blanket, James grew extremely angry, as he believed that Cliff's tragic death was a direct result of the driver's actions. "Don't you dare touch him! What happened? Tell me the truth!" He had the urge to hit him, but his friends quickly intervened, preventing any further escalation of the situation. James later claimed he smelled alcohol on the driver's breath, but there was no concrete evidence to prove this. In the aftermath of the crash, Metallica's drummer, Lars Ulrich, had been hospitalized with a broken toe while his bandmates coped with their grief in the only way they knew how, by turning to alcohol. When they returned to their hotel, the band drank and drank and drank in an effort to cope with the unimaginable shock of witnessing their friend get killed in a traffic accident they had survived. Lars reflects on those days, saying, "We didn't understand how to grieve or deal with the pain. We basically kept pushing forward, tried to ignore everything, and drowned our sorrows in vodka. We didn't have the emotional tools to sit down and truly process what had happened, so we just kept going because that's all we knew." The doctors at the hospital had given James a bunch of sedatives because he was freaking out, but they didn't put him to sleep, so he kept drinking beer, vodka, whiskey, whatever was within his reach. Kirk remembers that at 4 in the morning, the day after the accident, he heard James drunk on the street shouting, "Cliff? Cliff, where are you?" It was devastating, and I just broke into tears. But after a few days of heavy drinking, the band's manager turned to the group and said, "Get your therapy out through your music, jump right back on the horse, and ride on." The band couldn't believe what they were hearing and responded, "What do you mean, man? This is our buddy, screw you." And it took them a couple more days to grasp the concept of that kind of strength and live up to Cliff's wishes, as he would say, "Battle on, friends." Meanwhile, the investigation at the crash site came to its conclusion, and during a subsequent interview, a local freelance photographer who arrived a day after the accident dismissed the possibility of black ice as the cause. He stated it was impossible because the road was dry and the temperature was around 4 degrees Fahrenheit above the freezing point. This observation was supported by the police who, like James stated immediately after the crash, found no ice on the road. They did, however, mention that the tracks at the accident site were exactly like the ones seen when drivers fall asleep behind the wheel. The driver, who was British but remained unnamed, had been driving for about 6 hours at that point. However, the driver testified under oath that he was well rested and had rested during the day. The driver of the second bus confirmed this to the authorities. Over the years, the band has occasionally speculated whether alcohol, drugs, or the driver falling asleep played a role in the accident. However, the investigations ultimately cleared the driver of any wrongdoing. The day after the accident, a follow-up story by the area's daily newspaper reported that the driver of the tour bus was released from arrest, but was prohibited from driving and required to contact the police once a week until the investigation concluded. A week later, it was reported that the public prosecutor had lifted the travel restrictions on the driver, allowing him to return home. There had been discussions about potentially charging him with manslaughter, but within months, there were rumors that he had changed his name and resumed working, driving various bands across Europe. Metallica, on the other hand, chose to avoid tour buses since that tragic day. Even years later, guitarist Kirk Hammett couldn't shake a haunting feeling, revealing, "To this day, I think that I was the one who could have died since Cliff was sleeping in my bunk. That feeling has never left me. It could have been me." Incredibly, Metallica made a surprising return to the stage just 43 days after the accident, taking on a secret special guest role for their longtime associates, Metal Church. After enduring countless auditions where they listened to hundreds of bassists, Metallica made the decision to move forward by welcoming the young bassist Jason Newsted into the band. But even though Cliff Burton was with Metallica for only 3.5 years, his memory and musical legacy remain unforgettable. Some of the most devoted fans of Metallica even consider that the band's golden era, when they were undeniably the #1 thrash band worldwide, was precisely during the period Cliff Burton was their bass player. Coincidence or not? From 1982 until his untimely demise in 1986, Cliff had played a pivotal role in shaping Metallica's legacy, contributing his genius to their first 3 albums, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets. But who was this incredibly talented young man? Clifford Lee Burton was born on February 10, 1962, in San Francisco, California, amid the hippie movement. From a young age, music began to attract his attention, and at the age of 6, he started piano lessons. However, during his teenage years, Cliff's musical interests expanded to rock, classical, country, and eventually the world of heavy metal. Then all of a sudden, his brother Scott passed away due to a brain aneurysm when Cliff was just 13 years old. This loss had a profound impact on Cliff, reinforcing the belief that life should not to be squandered on trying too hard to make other people happy. Now he openly told others, "I'm going to be the best bassist for my brother." Cliff was 14 when he began playing in his first band, Easy Street, named after a strip joint in San Mateo. He left the piano behind and started playing the bass. Initially, he wasn't very good at it, but after a year of lessons, his teacher acknowledged that Cliff had surpassed him in skill and had nothing more to teach him. However, Cliff believed there was still much to learn, so he turned to Steve Doherty, a jazz bassist who played an important role in introducing him to the works of Beethoven and Bach, teaching him to read music and helping him define his playing style definitively. At just 20 years old, Cliff already earned a well-deserved reputation as one of the best musicians in the California metal scene, and it was only a matter of time before he was recruited by a band that aligned more with his emerging talents as an instrumentalist and songwriter. In 1982, during a performance by the band Trauma at the famous Los Angeles venue Whiskey A Go Go, James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, the young founders of the promising thrash metal band Metallica, were also present. Their jaws dropped when they witnessed Cliff Burton take the stage for a solo. And what astonished them even more was that the solo came from a bass guitar, not a lead guitar as they had expected. Cliff's aggressive and awe-inspiring performance that day left a lasting impression on them. And with Metallica's bassist, Ron McGovney, recently departing, James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich saw Cliff Burton as the perfect replacement. Cliff made his debut with Metallica on March 5th, 1983, and it was an instant success. He was not only a gifted musician and composer, but also the only member capable of composing melodies in his head and transcribing them without ever playing them before. At the time, a bass guitarist didn't really need very much in the way of effects, as their main use was to keep a steady beat and fill the lows in the song. But Cliff was not a fan of this. Joining after the songs for the album Kill 'Em All were written, he rewrote all the bass parts, enhancing their quality and flow. One notable aspect that set Cliff apart was his use of the distortion technique to give his bass a prominent presence, distinguishing him from other thrash metal bassists whose sounds were often buried under the distortion of guitars. Cliff Burton was on the rise to become one of the greatest bassists in the world, just as he had vowed to his late brother. Unfortunately, fate had a cruel twist in store for him. But despite the tragically shortened path of his life, Cliff's impact on the world of music, his pioneering spirit in redefining the role of the bass guitar in metal, and his enduring legacy within Metallica's iconic sound remain an indelible part of rock history. As we remember Cliff Burton, we're reminded that his spirit lives on not only in his music, but also in the hearts of countless fans worldwide. Cliff Burton was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame alongside his fellow Metallica team on April 4th, 2009. 2 years later, in 2011, an online poll organized by Rolling Stone magazine positioned him as the 9th best bassist and 25th on Rolling Stone's list of the 50 greatest bass players of all time.